What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my man in the corner, producer Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talker. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast, the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's some interesting stats that popped up about one of their quarterbacks that I think is fun to talk about. Excited to dive into it a little bit. Meanwhile, while I do not agree with this, one Steeler insider believes the team is not hunting for a new corner. I think I'm going to rebuttal it and hopefully have a fun conversation. Maybe we'll get him on the show next time. And for the first time this offseason, one of the Pittsburgh Steelers' premier players has spoken. And while it's just a July interview, it's still big because it's the first time he spoke since last season. We'll dive into all that. Plus, as we do every single day, answer all of your questions. So please make sure that you're tossing them in the chat. We'll get to them throughout the show and at the end of the show before we jump off here. It's a beautiful day here in the Berg. How you feeling, my friend?
I'm feeling fantastic today. I mean, like you mentioned, last couple of weeks, it's been beautiful weather. It's been great. And now there's light at the end of the tunnel. 2 weeks from today, Steelers report to Latrobe for training camp. So it is quickly coming upon us. I'm very excited.
Yeah. For those of you, I don't think we told this story on the show, so I'm excited to tell this story on the show. Nick, I want to say about a week ago, after the show goes, hey, I got to talk to you about, some time that I won't be here. And I was like, all right. And he starts the conversation off by saying, I won't be here for the next word that came out of his mouth was opening. And I was like, no, don't tell me you're not here for week one, man. Please don't tell me you're not around for week one. Says he's not here for the start of training camp. We'll get through it. But for those of you who want to rag on Nick a little bit for deciding to go see a concert, legendary concert in Madison Square Garden. I mean, look at priorities, man. Priorities. You could hang out and look for headlines, or you could go watch good music.
Hey, listen, I've never been to MSG. Opportunity comes, you take the opportunity. Yes. As much as I will miss the first week of training camp and some helmets and shorts, some more, it's gonna be bittersweet being in New York City instead.
I will. I'm gonna send you as many backs on backers videos as possible. Just kind of tease you a little bit. Just be like, yeah, here you go. Here you go. It's like when Steven used to go to practice and just text us updates. Like, It's like I'm there, but I'm not,
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be a good time. We are 2 weeks away. Shakur here with a great reminder. NCAA 25 comes out on Sunday. Nobody will be able to talk to me for about 3 days after that. Very excited for that one. Let's talk some Pittsburgh Steelers football here. We got 3, I think, pretty good conversations. And for July, at this time of the season, or this time of the year, there's not always a lot to talk about, but these are 3 that I found pretty intriguing, to be honest with you. We'll start with a Russell Wilson stat. So the 33rd team collected all of the rate of dropbacks with a quarterback hit in 2023. Leading the way is Tennessee Titans quarterback Will Levis with a 25.5% hit rate on dropbacks. A quarter of the time that he dropped back into coverage or dropped back to pass, he was hit by a defender. Number 2 on that list is Pittsburgh Steelers current quarterback Russell Wilson with a 20.4% hit rate. Now, to follow up on that, Justin Fields is on this list as well with a 17.5%. And then Kenny Pickett, which is a bit surprising when healthy, was only at 16.4% in 2023. Now, you could look at that and say, yeah, who cares? Last year, he was with the Denver Broncos. A surprising stat on top of that is that the Denver Broncos, according to Pro Football Focus, actually had a better pass block percentage or pass block rating, whatever they do, than the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2023, which is a bit alarming. I'm going to dive into why I think that's not a big concern, but you see that stat. I sent it to you this morning. Your first reaction, outside of the fact that if you do click on this tweet, and I think we have to share it in somewhere, but if you click on this tweet, it's like a 400, maybe 1,000 word story in a tweet, and then it's this stat. So it's like an artifact at that point, and then some good detail behind it. Before we dive into why I think that's not a big deal and why I think the Steelers are the team to correct this, I want your reaction on Russ being the second most hit quarterback in 2023, and then, according to Pro Football Focus, going to a worse offensive line.
Yeah, first and foremost, if you haven't seen that tweet, it is the Lord of the Rings of tweets. So, enjoy yourself there. It's not going to be a short time on Twitter if you're trying to read through that entire thing. But, as far as seeing Russell Wilson gets hit a lot, okay, what else is new for Pittsburgh Steelers quarterbacks? I mean, Kenny Pickett did it all the time in his 2 years. Ben Roethlisberger did it for 18 years in Pittsburgh. It's going to happen because these quarterbacks like to extend the play, even whenever it's unnecessary. And that is frustrating a lot and sometimes completely unnecessary, but that's Russell Wilson. That's what he's done to build up what some believe and many believe is a Hall of Fame resume. So he's going to stick to what he's doing, and you're just hoping that the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line is better than that patchwork that the Denver Broncos did last year. But, at the same time, you see those stats, and I don't know how PFF does a lot of their stats. That one makes no sense to me if it's that drastic on either side of things.
Yeah, I agree. And the PFF thing, look, I'm not a PFF guy, never been a PFF guy. I'm into analytics. I like analytics. I think they're a good part of the game. I had somebody try to explain to me the PFF side of things one time, and in the process of explaining it, said that over the course of time, their community, their amount of contributors got so large that they actually lost track of exactly how things are ranked or rated. So at this point, it's almost just like being made up. It's crazy to me. It doesn't make any sense. This is why I'm not worried about Russell Wilson getting hit. So I expect Russell Wilson to be a guy who runs himself into trouble from time to time. I expect Justin Fields to be a guy who runs himself into trouble from time to time. Having Broderick Jones and hopefully Troy Fautanu helps that a ton. Having Zach Frazier helps that a ton. And obviously Isaac Seumalo and James Daniels, certainly. I think that not having a wide receiver 2 is a massive upgrade is a massive boost for Russell Wilson not running himself into trouble. And the reason I say that is because you now have to look at Pat Freiermuth much more often than you would if you had Brandon Ayuk and George Pickens. And I'm not saying that it's a blessing not to have Brandon Ayuk and George Pickens, because that would clearly be a great scenario for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But having to rely on your tight end more is going to help that. On top of that, you're going to run the football so much that you're going to open yourself up for play action as much as any team in the NFL. And then once that gets rolling and you got guys in the box and you're able to spread guys out, George Pickens is able to do what George Pickens does. And you could bag on him or criticize how George Pickens is only good for deep balls and catching routes across the middle and taking it 60. If routes across the middle and taking it 60 is what you're good at, hey, look that's totally fine, because those are quick passes that go a long way, and Russell Wilson's going to exceed in them. And then you have, I don't know, at this point, like 15 slot guys that are going to be utilized as slot guys, which means that Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, Scotty Miller, Quez Watkins, Marquez Callaway, Connor Hayward, probably tossing Jaylen Warren and Naji Harris out there as well. Slot guys are quick guys. Those are quick routes. Those are not deep balls. The Steelers offense is going to be designed to get the ball out of Russell Wilson's hands a lot sooner than I think the Denver Broncos offense was. And you could go back and look at that. I mean, they had a tight end, I get that, but they also had Cortland Sutton, who's a deep threat, and Jerry Jeudy, who's a deep threat, on top of Tim Patrick, who's a deep threat, and Lil Jordan Humphreys, who's a deep threat. The Steelers don't have any deep threats outside of just George Pickens and I guess Van Jefferson, but I don't expect him to be a 700-800 yard receiver. I expect him to be a 200-300 yard receiver. And if that's all you're utilizing him for, it's fine. I don't see that being an issue for the Steelers. I don't see the sack rate being as big of an issue for the Steelers. I think that they'll settle it down. And I also think that Arthur Smith's not going to want his quarterback to be in trouble, so they will utilize quick routes and that kind of stuff. The Steelers offense is going to be meticulous this season. That's my prediction when it comes to Russell Wilson and how they're looking.
Yeah, I think meticulous is the perfect word for it, because you look at what the Steelers want to do from day one when they got into camp. Everybody's saying, oh, we're going to be a physical team. And that was rookie camp. That Arthur Smith was looking at his new offensive linemen, the first rounder and the second rounder, and saying, you two are going to be massive this year, because all we're going to do is punch people in the mouth. And that is exactly what the Steelers are going to do. And if they do it to a successful clip, the amount of times Russell Wilson drops back is going to be limited anyway. So, I agree with you. I do think that if they're able to execute the game plan that Arthur Smith wants, it's going to keep Russell Wilson off the ground.
Yeah, I don't have any worries about Russ being a sack-heavy quarterback. And if he is, you got Justin Fields. And I can tell you this, watching OTAs and minicamp, Justin Fields, Yeah, he probably does get sacked a lot. He probably avoids 80% of those sacks just because nobody moves like Justin Fields moves. So I think they'll be totally fine. And again, the Steelers did this well last year with a bad offensive coordinator and a quarterback that ran himself into trouble equally as much almost as Russell Wilson. Next thing I want to talk about here is the Pittsburgh Steelers cornerback situation. Steelers insider Brian Bacco says that they're not most likely going to sign an outside option and instead just going to work with guys like Beanie Bishop and Anthony Averett and I don't know, Thomas Graham and Grayland and Josiah Scott and all those names that you have a hard time remembering because, well, quite frankly, I don't know if any of them are worthy of remembering at this point in the offseason. I don't know if I agree with that. And the reason I don't agree with that, and I hope Bacco sees this because I would love to call him and just say, hey, just so you know, win against you today on the podcast. You should come on tomorrow and talk it out with me. The reason I don't see the Pittsburgh Steelers adding or sticking with who they have, at least right up until the season, is simply because nothing that they've done to this point has said that that's the route that they're going to take. They haven't been cautious with any decision that they've made throughout the offseason, including signing Cam Sutton. That is one that came with a ton of criticism that in years past, you probably wouldn't look at the Steelers as a team that would sign Cam Sutton or even consider signing Cam Sutton. But this year, it's Super Bowl or bust. This year, they're looking at it and saying, we need to win playoff games and we need to have the best team possible to win playoff games. And to do that, we need a slot corner. They're not going to roll Josiah Scott out there in week 1 and say, this is good enough, sounds good. Now, that could rule out a name like Chandon Sullivan or Elijah Riley or those lesser names where you say, okay, that's not really an upgrade for 8 weeks. But I don't think it rules out Patrick Peterson. I don't think it rules out Akella Witherspoon. I don't think it rules out, if you want to get crazy, Stephon Gilmore or Quan Williams or any of those guys. If you're a bigger name that's still out there, a guy that will make a solid contribution and be a difference maker on the defense, the Steelers are going to look at them because, quite frankly, they're hunting for a championship. They're hunting for a Lombardi. Sitting around on your hands for 8 weeks and saying, I hope this works out, just doesn't seem to fit anything that they've done. The Steelers have gone out and got Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. They added to their offensive line. They got Arthur Smith, which is no coincidence, Patrick Queen, Payton Wilson, Dante Jackson, Deshaun Elliott. They went out and signed Dean Lowry, who's as big of a sleeper signing as there possibly comes in Pittsburgh. Nothing they've done this offseason says we are not going to be aggressive. If you're looking to trade for Brandon Ayuk at this point, you're also looking to sign another corner for probably nothing. I think it's a long shot that they stick with who they have, and I think it's much more likely that the Steelers go and get another corner, even if they already have a bunch of options that some people feel comfortable with.
See, the only reason I disagree with you in that aspect is the fact that they brought in specifically Cam Sutton because they knew and they had to know that it was going to be 6+ games for Cam Sutton. So there was already a plan in place for whenever the suspension came down. And at this time, you know, the only other way that I would say, all right, maybe they brought him in early to get him a little extra work because they knew he's not going to be around early in the season. But you look at what they've shown, and they have given a lot of opportunities through OTAs, through rookie camp to a lot of these younger guys, the Beanie Bishops, as you mentioned. Anthony Averett was at rookie camp, so they wanted to get an extended look at him, some extra reps at him. So I feel like they have their eyes on these guys, and the reason they brought in Cam Sutton was to give them another option, but I feel like they already knew that something was coming down the pike, so they probably already had a plan in place. And at this point, wouldn't you think that they would have unveiled that plan already going into training camp, or do you really think that they would wait on that until, you know, a couple of days into training camp, or at least the opening of training camp in 2 weeks?
So I think that the Steelers had an understanding that Cam Sutton was getting suspended. I don't believe that they expected it to be 8 games. And maybe I'm wrong there, but I think at some point they were hopeful that 8 games got cut down to 4. Because typically in the NFL, I mean, I've had conversations with the NFLPA and people inside the NFLPA where it's not really an appeal process. It's, hey, a player says, I would like to appeal this suspension. And the NFL just says, all right, sounds good. We're cutting it in half because that's just a process that they're not looking to go through. Now, if it's longer, if it's Myles Garrett situations where he's kicked out of the league, or Josh Gordon situations where he's kicked out of the league, Montravius Bryant, excuse me. If it's guys like that, bigger names, bigger situations, I understand it. But I think the Steelers were looking at 4 to 6 games max. 8 might have surprised them a little bit. I agree with you that they have options and they felt comfortable with those options. I don't think that if they get to training camp and Anthony Averett isn't as good as they hoped he was, and they're looking at guys where it's like, okay, we could start him, but you're picking between Elijah Riley and James Pierre quality players, you're probably going to look elsewhere. I think at some point it's going to hit a point where the Steelers just know that their best decision is to add somebody from the outside. And maybe that's not this week. And I kind of expect it to be sooner rather than later. But does your mind change if we go to training camp? These guys are not impressing almost at all. And we're hitting the first week of August, and the Steelers still don't have. I mean, you could look at the linebacker situation last year where it's the Steelers wanted Mark Robb to be that guy. They realized very quickly Mark Robb wasn't that guy. Quan Alexander came to town, and there it was. Could you look at it and say that could be the case?
I could see that happening, but at the same time, how value do they think the slot corner position is compared to something like that middle linebacker 3 position where they're hoping that somebody steps up and they don't?
I agree. I agree with that. The inside linebacker position is much more valuable than the slot corner, but I also don't think that you're going to just ignore your slot corner position, especially in the AFC North. Like, okay, Cam Sutton comes back in week 8. It takes him 2 weeks to get off the ground because he hasn't been with the team in, 8 weeks, and he needs to get back into football playing shape. Okay, great. You're going into the back half of the season where you play the Browns, the Bengals, and the Ravens twice. They all have great slot corners. The Kansas City Chiefs have a great slot corner. You're the Philadelphia Eagles. Devontae Smith can play literally anywhere. A.J. Brown could play literally anywhere. Like, you're kind of taking a risk where I think that position is valued in the Steelers' schedule where it could become an issue. Now, I also think that what helps this situation, at least in the terms of signing, is a guy like Patrick Peterson isn't your every down slot corner. A guy like Akella Witherspoon might be more than Patrick Peterson, but let's say Chandon Sullivan, let's say Quan Williams. These guys are not every single downs. They have flaws in different areas that you're going to have to make up for, which I think helps. Like, I think if you sign a Patrick Peterson, he's a backup outside, starter on the inside, and then an Arnold Grayland or a Thomas Graham or a Josiah Scott, somebody who's a firmer tackler, is your backup to also play on the inside, which helps. If Patrick Peterson or any of those guys are signing for $1 million, $2 million, it just, like, there's no reason not to. At some point, there's no reason not to.
Yeah, especially because you have the space whenever you restructured Alex Highsmith and did nothing with it. So
yeah, you have $15 million just sitting there going, all right, well, Brandon Ayuk might be available, but if not, let's go get Patrick Peterson because might as well.
That is an interesting parallel to draw.
It's a drop.
I get it. Yeah, but
it's a drop. Yeah. It's not ideal, and ideally they could get both, but let's be realistic. All right, while we wait on the corners and what the Steelers are going to bring into training camp, I do want to answer Michael's question here because we appreciate you as always, Michael. One early bold prediction for the offense and defense for Michael. It's Corey Trice surprises everyone and takes over as cornerback 2, top 5 secondary. And then on offense, Russ throws for 3,500 yards and 30 touchdowns. Corey Trice as your cornerback 2 and a top 5 secondary in the NFL might be a little bit of a reach there, but I get it. I like the bold prediction. My bold prediction on offense, and then I'll toss it over to you, is that Jaylen Warren surpasses 1,000 yards before Naji Harris does this season. That's my bold prediction. What you got on offense?
On offense, my bold prediction. That's a tough one, but I think what I'm going to go with is Calvin Austin emerges as your wide receiver too. He ends up being a 750 plus yard receiver this year, and he shows that even though he's undersized, he can play the outside and the inside as well. So I think that's my bold prediction for the offense.
I like that a lot. Calvin Austin's my dude. He is a friend of the show, which honored to say friend of the show. On defense, Corey Trice being cornerback 2 is bold, man. That's bold. I'm gonna go bold prediction on defense is that Payton Wilson is the starting inside linebacker next to Patrick Queen by week 8. By week 8, Payton Wilson's your inside linebacker 2.
I like that. I mean, Payton Wilson is a guy that has grown on me every second since the draft. I mean, whenever he was drafted and you see everything and you go back and you look at, Nick Martin, who's a contributor for the website, what he was doing, talking to Payton Wilson down at the Senior Bowl in Mobile. And you say, all right, this guy could be a decent contributor. He comes in, he's immediately, linebacker 3 because of the injury to Cole Holcomb. But the more you see of him on the field, the more you see, Aaron Curry talk about what Payton Wilson is and how much of a beast he is and how fast he is and how physical he's going to be. I'm excited to see him in pads and backs on backers. I think, everybody loves the Landon Roberts, and we're going to talk about that probably with one of the questions, but I'm excited to see what Payton Wilson looks like in that drill.
Yeah. Payton Wilson versus like a Naji Harris. It's going to get lined up. Mike Tomlin's going to announce that one really quick. And it's going to be awesome. It's definitely going to be awesome. I like that one. What was yours? You didn't give me yours.
My bold prediction, and again, this is a bold prediction. This is not something I'm saying is likely. Bold prediction, Nick Herbig equals or greater than Alex Highsmith sacks this year.
Oh, I like that one a lot, actually. That's a good bold prediction right there. That's a real good. Nick Herbig could be a stud. I like that one. I like that one a lot. I really, really like that one a lot. All right. Before we dive into your guys' questions, please make sure to keep tossing them in here. We got one more thing to talk about. Running back Naji Harris spoke for the first time this offseason, which I know you're thinking, who cares? It's a July interview. It's at a boxing event. Nobody cares. He didn't say anything significant. It's the first time Naji Harris has spoken all summer long. It's potentially the first time we're going to hear from Naji Harris until the season, because Naji Harris does not like talking to the media, which is, that's whatever. Everybody's on your own. You don't want to talk to the media. You don't want to talk to the media, but it's very far and few between that you hear from the Pittsburgh Steelers starting running back. This is what he had to say about the Steelers offense during the Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal fight on Saturday night. Quote, feeling good, man. We did good this offseason. Obviously, we picked up our 2 quarterbacks, so we're excited about it. We think we're going to have a lot of good things happening in 2024. Both quarterbacks, the Steelers are excited. Naji Harris feels good about it. I think I got 2 takeaways from a very short quote. The first one is that there are very few concerns about Naji Harris being upset that the Steelers didn't pick up his 5th-year option. Maybe there are, but he's good at hiding them. He feels good about this offense. And 2 is that you're probably going to get 100% of Naji Harris. Did you hear that? My computer just started playing some very fancy music. Some very 100% all-in Naji Harris in 2024 who feels like, look, last year Naji Harris spent a lot of time defending his offensive coordinator and his quarterback and his offensive line and everybody else because there was criticism everywhere. The first quote we get is, yeah, we're excited, man. Things could be really good. It just feels like a positive attitude in Pittsburgh right now, which is nice to see. Really nice to see.
Yeah, play the hits, Naji. That's essentially the biggest things of the offseason. Quarterbacks, new offense, excited. Way to play the hits, Naji. That's exactly what you do. I mean, I understand it's anticlimactic for those that have been waiting to hear from Naji Harris, but it's a boxing interview ringside. Like, you weren't going to get a deep one-on-one 30 for 30 type interview, but he played the hits. That's what you want to hear from your star running back, that he's excited, that he's happy with the new quarterback play. So, all in all, nice to hear from him. And, I eagerly await the next one.
I eagerly await the next one too. Hopefully it's just as positive, because positive Naji Harris is one of the best interviews you could possibly have. Going off Naji Harris is also one of the best interviews that you could possibly have. But to be honest, it's not as fun when guys are standing there trying to defend an offensive coordinator that I think everybody in the locker room knew was getting fired. So it's just not as enjoyable. So this is a good one. Glad to know that Naji Harris is still part of this and he feels good about the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it's good to hear from him. It's definitely good to hear from him. All right. Before we head out of here, let's answer all of your questions. So please make sure that you're dropping them in the chat. We'll get to all of them before we head out of here. What do we got?
Let's start with Daryl's. He asks, do you think the Steelers will pick up a slot corner, which we already talked about, or a wide receiver before training camp this season? I'll go to the second part of the question for you. Do you still believe that the Steelers will add another wide receiver before the start of the season?
Before the start of the season, yes. Not before the start of training camp. I don't think the next window opens for the Steelers to make a wide receiver trade until about a week into training camp. Teams have to realize their guy isn't showing up. Cortland Sutton's not showing up to training camp. Brandon Ayuk's not showing up to training camp. Those guys have to show their teams, hey, look, man, you're not getting me for nothing. It's not happening. After that, the next one will be right before the season when teams are really desperate and looking to say, hey, look, we're not going to let this guy sit out. We're going to trade him now. The Steelers get something done, and then they extend Brandon Ayuk or Cortland Sutton or whoever right before the season. It is a bang move at that point. I do expect them to make a trade before the season. Yes.
Demetrius Barr says, I'm going to my first Steelers game this year versus the Cowboys. That's a great one, too. Need to know some spots to visit.
Yeah, if you see me walking to the game, give me a holler. Would love to see you for your first game. That's awesome, dude. Enjoy. Some spots to check out. The North Shore, just during game day, is the best place to be. Obviously, you can tailgate anywhere. You can hop in and out of all those bars. It's a good time. Go to the Strip District. I know it's real touristy, but go to the Strip District. It's worth it, dude. Like it's cool to get there, especially on a weekend when there is a home game. Have some Pamela's, eat some Peace Love little donuts. I mean, like, I don't care if you're on health kick or what. Eat some Peace Love little donuts. Eat them all. That's a good time. And then I don't know, a couple of spots that I'm a big Shady Side guy. Got to get some Millie's ice cream. Big Lawrenceville guy. So I would check out all those spots. And then if you're into the zoo, man, I'm a zoo guy. So hit up the zoo.
Yeah, I'll add to that. If you want a really good sandwich, everybody says Permanis, and it's good for what it is. It's Permanis. I'm not going to bash on Permanis because I had it like every week in college.
Yeah.
Pepes in the Strip District is up
Pepes
there.
Is way better than Permanis.
It is.
Way better.
It is really good. It's like the best sandwich shop I've ever had.
Yeah, you either go to the one in the Strip District or, I mean, like, go to the one in the Strip District. It's a lot safer.
Yes.
But you can also go to the one. I'm a Wilkinsburg guy. Like, I go to the one in Wilkinsburg, right on Penn Ave. It looks just as sketchy on the inside as it does on the outside, but it is phenomenal. So, DeLuca's is good too. I like DeLuca's. Pepes, man. Pepes all day.
Pepes is it. Pepes is it. Let's go to Joe Dilly's question. Says, I'm worried about the Steelers' cap and potential cap casualties. If they don't keep Cam, they do or don't sign Russell Fields. Where do you think they should start off next off season? I think Ayuk would do some damage, in my opinion.
I think he would too, depending on the situation, I guess. Like, if you aren't going to sign a massive quarterback contract, you could really do whatever you want. There's nothing holding you back. You could figure it all out. If Cam's off your payroll next year, you could figure that out too. The problem with not having Cam and not having a quarterback is now your first two picks in the NFL draft have to be a quarterback and a replacement for Cam Hayward. And that's not easy to do. Like, that's very difficult to do, actually. So the bigger question is what do you do a quarterback? If you could get a quarterback contract for cheap, you could do pretty much anything, including paying a wide receiver. If you are looking at another veteran, if you're going to try to re-sign Russell Wilson, it gets more tricky. But it all starts with the quarterback. If you're going to go rookie quarterback, go trade for Brandon Ayuk. Go sign whoever. Doesn't matter, because you're on a rookie deal. You could do anything you want.
There's one rookie quarterback coming up that a lot of people have been talking about this week, and asked from Vibing with the Dog says Carson Beck in the 2025 NFL draft. So off of that last question, do you think Carson Beck would be a fit for the Steelers in next year's draft?
I do, but I think Carson Beck's going to go first in the draft. I think he's going to go first in the draft this upcoming year. He's a monster. The best decision he could have made is staying in college, because I think he was a first round quarterback coming into the league. Like, I think by the end of the draft process this year, he would have been above Bo Nix, probably above JJ McCarthy. Like, he would have been that guy. Instead, probably above Michael Penix if the Atlanta Falcons, were smart, knew what to do. But I think this year he's going to be the top quarterback in the draft. I really do. He's good. He's got all the mechanics. He's cool, calm, and collected in the pocket. He's athletic. I'm a big Carson Beck guy. I don't think the Steelers get a shot at him. If they do, you draft him. You don't even think about, you draft him. Doesn't matter if Justin Fields is there or not. you draft Carson Beck, along with probably 3 or 4 other quarterbacks in the first round that if they're there, you don't wait, you don't hesitate. You take a guy that you believe could be the future.
ZYE wants to know backs on backers, Jaylen Warren versus a Landon Roberts with money on the line. Who are you guys taking? Keep up the great work.
Appreciate you as always. That's so tough. We're going best out of 3. Best out of 3. We'll go best out of 3. I'm going E-Rob. Best out of 3. I'm going E-Rob. I just think there's, my dad used to say it to me when I was a kid. All right. Like when you got beat up at school. I don't know everybody else. There wasn't fights all the time, but I was a bad kid. I was getting into fights. I was doing dumb stuff. And my dad used to tell me very plain and simply, it's not how big you are, it's how angry you can get. And I can tell you right now, E-Rob is the scariest human being I've ever met outside of James Harrison. So you could just tell this man just walks around angry. So I'm going E-Rob, best out of 3. Jaylen Warren's going to put up a fight. That's the matchup I'm most excited for, outside of maybe Patrick Queen versus Jaylen Warren in backs on backers.
Yeah, that is 100% going to be the featured storyline of backs on backers day one. There's no way that is not the headlines the next day is this was awesome. This was insane. So I 100% see that being, I want that now to be the headline on All Steelers Talk on the website is just this was awesome and a picture of E-Rob and Jaylen.
I think that might have to happen.
Daryl Oglesby wants to know, do you think the Steelers are going to sign Justin Fields to a long-term deal if Russell Wilson doesn't have a good season?
I don't see long-term deal no matter what. I see a 2-year deal, allow Justin Fields to have 2 years, maybe a 1-year extension, but I think a 2-year deal allows them to get 1 year where he's super cheap and 1 year where he's still very cheap, but, allows him to kind of make some more money. That's how I see it. Maybe a Jordan Love type contract. We talked about that before, where it's $4 or $5 million in year 1 and then 13, 14 million in year 2 backloaded so that there's an out. I think that's the way to go. I don't see them going over 2 years. To be honest, it's a better shot that they go less than 2 years than it is that they go more.
Let's move over to Seth's question, who says, is Stephon Gilmore not a good slot cornerback? Seems wild to me that he's not on a team yet.
Yeah, it's just age, man. It's just we're at that point where Stephon Gilmore, Patrick Peterson, they don't need training camp. Teams don't really need them right now, so they're going to wait it out. The cornerbacks there's a lot of good cornerbacks in the NFL right now. So when it comes to playing slot, he probably could. He's not known for it. I'm sure anybody could. Any great corner can play the slot if need be. But there's the reason that the Steelers aren't approaching him is because he's 33, 34 years old, and that's just not your prime candidate for any team, especially a team like Pittsburgh, who is trying to go with younger options first.
No Coast Golf wants to know, wild idea, trade Naji to Philly for Cooper DeJean straight up. This one went straight to your heart, didn't it?
It did. I read that as it came in, and I highlighted it immediately. That is, look, man, Cooper DeJean was my guy. If you've been watching this show long enough, you understand how annoying I was when it came to the Pittsburgh Steelers should draft Cooper DeJean. It would be a remarkable trade. It would be as phenomenal of a trade as you come up with if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. Philadelphia would hang up the phone before you got the word Cooper out. What? No, sorry. Howie Roseman's hanging right up. Not happening. Would be great, but just no. It does. You're not getting a second round safety the first year in the NFL for your 4th year running back who's got a lot of tread on his tires, dealt with a little bit of a knee injury last year. And I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to the Philadelphia Eagles. And this is a great question. I love this question, but they have this guy, his name's Saquon Barkley, and he's pretty good. So I think they'll be okay.
I know Saquon and Naji on the same team. Hard Knocks midseason might have to move. Just say, all right, AFC North was a great idea, but we're going to go over
Philadelphia. Here. We're going to Philly. But, you got Cooper DeJean out there. There's noise. There's noise.
Let's go over to DKB17 says, I appreciate you guys reading the non-paid comments. Thoughts on edge 4 spot?
Yeah, dude, we're always here for every question, so make sure that you're dropping them. Appreciate you. Edge 4 right now, I think the favorite is Jeremiah Moon, former Baltimore Raven. I don't know how good I feel about that yet. We have to see him with pads on, but he's lengthy. The guy's real big, much bigger than the rest of their outside linebackers. I think that's going to help. David Perales is another name that is a name to watch come training camp. He slimmed up, lost a couple of pounds, and is ready to go in year 2, spent most of the last season on the practice squad. They're my top 2 picks for the outside linebacker 4 spot. I'm excited to, right now, during OTAs and minicamp, it's like, hey, welcome to the team. This is what you're looking at. During training camp, it's like, okay, here are the battles. Let's pay attention to them. So I'm excited to see how those two kind of compete as we get through July and August.
Aaron Ball says, is there a reason that all the sports shows or predictions that I see predict us to be worse than last year? I'd say we got better overall, especially at the quarterback position. It seems we're going to score way more.
Yeah, the Steelers will score more points this season than they have. And I mean, the quarterback aside, Arthur Smith is the reason why. That's, you have a real offensive coordinator and not Matt Canada, and that's just a massive upgrade. There, when they talk about this, it's really how bad the schedule is. The Steelers' schedule is as bad as I have ever seen a schedule in the NFL. It is terrible. It does not help them in any which way or form, and it wouldn't be surprising for them to finish worse than last season, even as a better team, just because of how bad their schedule is. That being said, good teams overcome bad schedules, and the Steelers have to do that. They're not afraid of the challenge. If I had to guess, they're 10 wins this season, 11 wins maybe, and that's to pull off the AFC North if they could really win some games in division, more games than expected. But it's all to do with the schedule. It is a terrible schedule.
I mean, look on the bright side with the schedule. You don't have to worry about, or you shouldn't have to worry about Mike Tomlin going up against two-win teams in a row. So there's no trap games, or there's fewer trap games. So that might be a good thing for the Steelers.
True. You have no time to focus on trap games because it's more so like, all right, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and then Kansas City on Christmas. Happy holidays. Yeah, it's going to be a good time.
Exactly. Omar's Burner said, Naji in a conditional 4th for CD Lamb just to give Jerry Jones a few drinks.
This is another good one. I like the CD and a 4, or Naji in a 4th. I think CD Lamb's going for a 1st round pick. To be honest, the only way that he's not a problem enough for Jerry Jones to do something dumb yet, and that could become a thing. But right now, CD Lamb is too cool, calm, and collected. There are minimal issues to where Jerry Jones isn't ready to pull the plug. Whereas if, he's talking a lot and there were some issues, 4th round pick, I could see it happening easy.
Lifted Ones wants to know, how would you rank the AFC North coaches?
This is a good question. Right now, I'd still go Mike Tomlin 1. I think Mike Tomlin deserves to be 1. John Harbaugh's 2. 0 questions asked there. Very close 1-2, I believe. I'd go Kevin Stefanski 3, and then Zach Taylor 4. I think depending on the year, those two could alternate. But Stefanski's a 2-time coach of the year. That's crazy. Like, that is a stat that you forget. That's like the most unrecognizable. What are we talking about? Our fun fact in the NFL. So I'm going to go Stefanski 3. I don't feel good about that, but I'm going Stefanski 3.
I'm still shocked the Cleveland Browns have had a head coach for longer than 2 years. So to have him have coach of the year twice, it's hard to compute if you're a Steelers fan. Two-time coach of the year and defensive player of the year. They've won 0 playoff games. So 1 playoff game against Pittsburgh Steelers. One playoff game.
One playoff game.
As much as we want to erase that one, they've won 1.
Yeah.
Alexander asks, what's the most likely quarterback situation for 2025?
I would say a rookie quarterback is the most likely situation for 2025. But I would say a rookie quarterback competing with Justin Fields. That's what I would say most likely. That's going to change a million times between now and next offseason. But looking at it a year in advance, Justin Fields versus a rookie quarterback competition is the most likely outcome for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
That's a wrap on today's questions.
Awesome. With that said, guys, we are going to head out of here. Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, please go find all of our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. We will be back tomorrow. Enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.